Happy to have you along on this Sunday morning. I'm Johnny Merrill. Once again, it is time for our Sunday morning public access programming available via our 5 Oahu radio stations and 5 stations on Maui and on Kauai. Hawaii stream at FM Live 365. Another way to pick us up if you're away from the terrestrial radio. It's not always a bad thing when a politician changes his or her mind, in this case, his mind. And after that busy legislative session, Governor Josh Green initially threw a lot of cold water on a few major reforms by adding them, if you recall, to his intent to veto list. But when it came down to decision time, crunch time, the governor signed them after all. So we wanted that suspense. Joining me today to discuss what some of these bills were and what might have been behind the governor's change of heart, once again, is Malia Hill, Director of Policy at the Grassroot Institute of Hawaii. They're available at grassrootinstitute.org. And they are a nonpartisan public policy think tank based here in downtown Honolulu that seeks to lower our cost of living, increase housing and healthcare access, expand opportunities, and make Hawaii a place where we can all thrive and prosper. So Malia is going to talk with us a little bit about the governor's non-vetoes and what we might look forward to in the coming year. So good morning to you, Malia. Happy Sunday.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, no, yep, exactly. We've spoke at the end of the session and covered a lot right there. And I recall that you were feeling pretty good about Grassroots priority bills. And can you remind the listeners what some of those big legislative wins were?
Yeah, I think one of the big one was SB 66, the shot clock for permitting. We were really excited about that. It basically gave a new route to get through after 60 days. So that was a big one. We had progress on school impact fees, asset forfeiture reform, and then there were a couple bills that would have helped historic review, those delays in getting historic review on building projects, especially new homes. So we had a bill that would redefine what qualified as historic, SB 15, and a bill about third-party review for some projects for historic preservation. That was HB 830. And, these were pretty big bills for us this year. They may not seem glamorous, but every single one of them, had the chance to make a real impact. And so we were very happy about seeing them get through the legislature.
Now that first one with the shot clock, that's with the permitting process. If it doesn't happen within 60 days, you have pretty much the go-ahead. Is that how that works? Can you refresh our memory as far as building is concerned?
Yes. So the SB 66, the shot clock bill, what it really did was create this sort of alternate path, like a release valve. So you would do your permit application, and if 60 days passes and nothing has happened, you have the choice to take an expedited path. Mm-hmm. And the expedited path, basically, you have to finish the application. You have to have all your pieces, everything that it requires. And then you would sign a waiver of liability and have a third-party certification. And then the permitting department gets 5 days just to make sure you really did enter everything you're supposed to. And then you could just start. Then you could start construction. It would just be deemed approved. So that's what the shot clock bill was.
Yeah, we'll see how that works out. Then the governor came out with his intent to veto list, and there were some few unpleasant surprises on it. What was the biggest disappointment in your opinion?
Well, the biggest disappointment was that shot clock bill, SB 66. I thought, it was understood. Everyone knows about how bad the permit delays are. We've all heard the horror stories, people waiting more than a year. I talked to a gentleman who had to rent a new home for his family to live in while they wait for their permit. So it felt like, hey, finally doing something about permit delays. And I explained how it worked. It's not like it was this dramatic thing. I mean, if you compare it to some of the stuff that happens on the mainland where it's like automatic in 15 days and stuff, this is hardly, the most radical permit bill you've ever seen. It was a compromise. And yet it ended up on the intent to veto list. The governor cited concerns about, it might skip necessary historic review. It might endanger, relics or burial sites. Basically, Iwi Kapuna cites that as one of the reasons that he put it on the veto list.
And I also know that the governor included one of the bills aimed at reforming that historical preservation in the intent to veto list. Now, what was your response to his rationale, Malia, for vetoing the shot clock and the historical preservation bills?
Yeah, the other item that made it to the intent to veto list was SB 15. And what that bill did was just redefine historic property so that it had to have some kind of claim to historic value. Because what was happening was the existing law had it so that if something's 50 years old, it kind of moves it into the historic category. And, if you think about it a little bit, merely turning 50 does not make you historic. Like, there needs to be something else, some other element, some sort of, other thing that could make it historic. And from a practical matter, what it means is just really overloading SHPD with all these things that need to be reviewed. And so then you delay the process, you delay how long it takes to get the approvals. You just really add to the cost and the trouble of building. So SB 15 also, in addition to the shot clock bill, similar reasons from the governor for putting them on the intent to veto list, basically concerns about historic review and endangering heritage and relics at Igu Kapuno. Those were all the things that were cited when it made it. Both those bills went to the intent to veto list.
All that drama, all that build-up, and then when the time came, though, however, the governor signed both bills. Do you know why he changed his mind on these?
Well, I can't claim to know exactly what he's thinking, but we can guess. If you look at both of them, the bills, neither of them really reduced any protections. All these state requirements for historic review and environmental review were still there. There's all the things that would trigger additional considerations. That wasn't part of these. And, we do know that recently a representative from the governor talked to Civil Beat about the historic definition bill and basically just said, well, we put it on the intent to veto list and then we were able to research it a little more. And basically, everything, all the existing statutes and laws that have to do with, handling Igu Kapuna, historic places and such, they're still there. And on the other hand, we need these ways to try to grow housing and kind of get rid of these delays and stuff. So I think that argument must have been what moved the governor. And, speaking for Grassroot, I know that on the shot clock bill, we launched a campaign that basically urged people to write to the governor, and hundreds of people responded, at this point. These protections are still there. We didn't get rid of the protection. So while I don't know for sure that this is why the governor changed his mind, I think that he was probably persuaded by the argument that those protections still existed and that there is a lot of public support for the idea of removing these roadblocks to creating housing.
Yeah. Malaya Hill, Policy Director, Grassroot Institute of Hawaii, grassrootinstitute.org for her work and the other staff members' work over there. Was there anything that you supported that you weren't surprised to see on the intent to veto list?
Yeah, one of the things that, when the intent to veto list came out, we were just, obviously, it was HB 126, which was asset forfeiture reform. It was a compromise bill to begin with. A previous asset forfeiture bill had been vetoed by Governor Ige. This wasn't even as strong as the one that had previously been vetoed by Ige. It didn't go as far as we'd want in reforming asset forfeiture. For example, it merely requires someone be charged rather than convicted of a crime for their property be forfeited. But it's still improvement. It's still a good reform. But we knew all along that there's really strong opposition, mostly from law enforcement, to reforming Hawaii's asset forfeiture system. And so we anticipated that this was going to be a bit of a fight. And when the governor put it on his intent to veto list, the rationale was, that asset forfeiture is needed. It's an aid in fighting crime.
But there was, like you just mentioned, the opposition to that. What was your response to that? I mean, even the compromise approach to the asset forfeiture reform, it seemed a little over the top, but there was still pushback on trying to come up with something a little bit, a better approach, let's put it that way.
Yeah, so, just in case anyone's lost it, asset forfeiture basically means that the government, the police, can take your property, even if you haven't necessarily been convicted of a crime, and they just get to keep it.
Yeah.
They basically do a court case, a case against your car or, whatever. And the thing is, there's not really any evidence that this helps law enforcement be more effective. In fact, there's a report that says, something very different. The Institute of Justice did a study of the states with extensive asset forfeiture systems to just see if it's true. Is it really a helpful tool? And Hawaii was one of the states in the study. And they basically found there's no relationship between asset forfeiture and higher rates of solving crime. If anything, they found that they're slightly worse at solving violent crimes, places with extensive asset forfeiture. They didn't really, know why. They said that maybe it has something to do with the incentives, higher incentive to solve a crime that has property involved, because then you can, get the property. Because fundamentally, if it doesn't prevent crime, then what it really is just a funding tool for law enforcement. And that creates some problems with incentives, especially when we're talking about, civil rights and property rights. That's why the reform was needed.
All right. So was this a clean sweep for your priority bills this year? And what else, Malia? Were you happy to see the governor sign into law? There were a couple others.
Yeah. So, it turns out the governor did end up signing the asset forfeiture bill after all. No explanation why. So I hope it was just, agreeing with us that it needed it. But other things he signed into law without any, much comment on it was the bill to reform school impact fees, basically getting rid of this extra fee, potentially unconstitutional fee that came with new construction of housing. He signed legislation that helps rebuild in Lahaina, anywhere where there's been that's a special management area. Bills to help foreign medical school graduates become doctors here more easily, getting rid of degree requirements for government positions. Not a bill, so he didn't sign it, but there was a fiscal notes resolution passed, which I think is really important, requiring the legislature, hopefully next year they'll actually have a bill that will just make them just find out how much something costs before they pass it. I think that would be great. So it was a pretty good year. They did some stuff with transit-oriented development, basically just making it easier to build near where the rail is, and increasing scope of practice for pharmacists. Lots of stuff that the governor signed that will make a difference.
It seems like Grassroot was pretty much happy with what the governor did. From what I was reading, a lot of people were very appreciative of that. Looking forward, you're probably already planning for the 2026 session. So what is Grassroot looking to accomplish next?
Yeah, we were happy. I'm in a strange position of just saying, thank you, Governor, good job, and looking forward. At the moment, our biggest focus is our work in the counties. Once the legislature ends, we can really focus on what's going on at the county level. And we've been testifying on a lot of things like property tax exemptions, property tax tiers, also pro-business measures like liberalizing the food truck requirements in Maui. But looking forward into the next session, we're going to keep looking at these measures that speed up home building. There's still a lot more of those regulatory barriers, slow approval things that we can really deal with and try to make it easier, less expensive to build more housing. We also want to continue to look at ways to make healthcare more accessible and, reduce unnecessary regulations on workers, like hair braiders, cosmetologists.
That's Malia Hill, Policy Director, Grassroot Institute of Hawaii. You can find her work and the other work from the members of Grassroot Institute of Hawaii at grassrootinstitute.org. Once again, excellent information, Malia. We'll talk to you again soon and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you.